I try to stay away from painting grey subjects as I thought that it's boring and there isn't many colors to play around with. If you are at the same stage, please allow me to share with you 7 tips to paint this grey bird, and I promise that you will look at grey subject differently after this video. I forgot to press the record button, so I did the underpainting on the wings and the chest of the bird and also the background. If we observe the reference photo closely, we can see the reflection of the background. The yellow light is being reflected on the grey feather. However, I think the background color is too bright, so I toned down the brightness a little bit and add more green to the background so that I could create depth for the painting and bring the focus to the main subject. Let's get back to our point, color reflection. In nature, any object with presence of light always receives color reflection from its surrounding, more or less depend on the physical structure and its surface. Glossy surfaces tend to reflect more light and colors more than the rough surface. There are many ways to achieve grey pigment, mixing 3 primary colors or 2 secondary colors. But if you don't want to mix your grey, you can buy and use it straight from the tube. It's called neutral tint. And the 3 pigments I use in this painting is permanent rose, orange hue, and indigo. Personally, I enjoy mixing my own grey as I could adjust color temperature, because some area the grey will look cool and other area it might look warmer. Pretty much almost brown color. Negative painting technique is a very important technique for watercolor. It doesn't matter what style or subject you are painting. If you use watercolor, then negative painting technique is necessary. Because watercolor is a transparent medium, you cannot paint light on top of dark. The only time that I would paint light on top of dark is when I use white gouache for the little highlight. If you haven't heard about negative painting before, it's basically the technique that you paint around the subject rather than the subject itself. For example, here I'm painting the grey feather, but if you pay close attention, while I'm painting the grey feather, I actually help to shape and define the white feather at the same time. Negative painting is not an easy technique, but if you put an effort to study watercolor, I have to say that it's important to learn about negative painting. Repeatedly, while I'm painting the grey feather on the wing, I actually help to shape the white feather below. So the white color in watercolor is actually the white of the paper, except the very tiny highlight that I use white gouache on top of watercolor. If you don't want to use white gouache, you have another option, is using masking fluid. But I'm not a big fan of masking fluid unless it's very necessary, because sometimes it could stain your paper, and other time if your paper is not tough enough, it also could rip your paper when you try to peel it off. And it's also time consuming because you need to apply masking fluid, let it dry before you can start painting. Working in layers is one of the main key to paint realism in watercolor. As I mentioned it before, watercolor is a transparent medium. So it's best to start with light and we can build it up darker by adding layers. Usually it takes me about 3 to 4 layers to reach its full saturation. Having said that, some area it only need 1 layer. As you could see here, I added my mixture of yellow to the reflected area. I add a bit of indigo into orange hue to mute its vibrancy a little bit before I paint it on the wings and the body of the bird. Some area of the bird has brown tone to it, so I mix orange hue with permanent rose and add a bit of indigo. Have you ever heard that actors could see differently from other people? Since I start painting, I pay attention to details, to colors, to reflections. So I could see colors in black, colors in gray, and some colors in white as well. If we just use one white tone, then our painting or our picture will look flat, such as the white feather on this bird here. It isn't just pure white, it contains gray, brown, and even orangey yellow. Another example is the eye of the bird. If you pay close attention, you will see the color dark brown, and very dark gray is the pupils, and also the highlight, which is the white color on this case. But in some cases, the highlight might not be white. It could be blue or green. It depends on the reflection. Normally, I try to leave the white of the paper as a highlight and using negative painting to paint around those highlights. But if it's too small or you accidentally paint on top of the highlight, you also have another option, which is white gouache. You can use white gouache on top of watercolor for the tiny highlight. Please excuse my rusty voice as I feel under the weather and still trying to recover. Bird is one of complex subjects to paint. Since I'm not aiming for a hyper-realistic painting, I learned to simplify my subject by painting only what is necessary. You can simplify your subject by squinting your eyes so that the pictures look blurry. Therefore, you could see only the main big shape. Usually, I just combine my small shapes and only stress on what is important to make the shape look three-dimensional. If I'm not sure what shape I should leave out and what I should include in my painting, that's when I use the squinting eye technique. For example, when I paint on the chest of the bird, I only did a few strokes that suggest that there is soft feather over here. If I paint every single feather that I could see, then my painting would look too crowded. Plus, the scale that I'm painting at the moment, it doesn't allow me to go for too detailed anyway. When we leave out all the unnecessary details, then it gives room for the viewer eyes to rest and know where to focus on. Pay attention to the feather direction, and I place each brush stroke follow the feather direction. I realized that my background is too light, so I mix the background color and start painting it on, carefully not to touch the bird, adding another layer to the wings area, and also to the tails and the belly of the bird. Painting the tails still follow the feather directions. The tree trunks that the bird is sitting on is quite complicated if you look at the photo. This is when our simplifying technique comes in handy again. I did not follow the photo reference exactly at this point, so I just paint what I think is necessary, giving this tree trunk some value, meaning dark and light, and then I use dry brush technique to suggest the wood texture. Final touch, I used the white gouache. I found that I lost a bit of the highlight, so I used white designer gouache to bring my highlight back and trying not to overdo it. If you like to learn how to paint birds in watercolor, please stay tuned as I do have some more birds coming up. If you find this video is useful, please feel free to share with your artist friend. In the meantime, please take care.